Hey everyone! Today I had an incredible opportunity sitting down with Nicolas Lietzau, the project lead for the video game Enderal, as well as the author of his new novel, Dreams of the Dying. I just wanted to inform you that while his book does take place in the universe of Enderal, it is meant to be a stand-alone story that does not require the reader to have played the game ahead of time in order to enjoy it. In this interview, we will be talking about Enderal in the first half, which will contain spoilers of the video game, but that will be followed by a discussion on his book, which will not contain spoilers. So, feel free to use the chapters or timestamps in the description below to skip over to our discussion for Dreams of the Dying if you wish. If you're interested in learning about an incredibly detailed and immersive new fantasy universe with memorable characters, a gripping mystery, and profound psychological themes, I would highly recommend you do so. Hi everybody, this is Angel Arts and welcome to a very special video today. I am joined here with a very special guest. I want you guys to meet Nicolas Lietzau. Nicolas, hi. Welcome to the channel.
Hi, thanks for having me.
For those of you who aren't really super familiar with Nicolas, don't worry, you're about to become more familiar with him thanks to this video. But if you're not super familiar with Nicolas at the moment, you might be familiar with a game called Enderal. For those of you who have been on my channel, that was a game that I actually played a few years ago. And believe it or not, it's a game that was built off of the Skyrim gaming platform from Ender Scrolls, I think, and
Elder Scrolls, yeah.
Elder Scrolls. Why did I call it Ender Scrolls? Elder Scrolls. Thank you. Goes to show how much I've been playing Skyrim. But
Same here.
it comes from a third-party company organization called Shore AI, and Nicolas happens to be one of the project leads for Enderal, and more specifically had a ginormous hand in virtually writing the entire game itself. And for those of you who don't know how much I love stories and writing, this is a big treat for me. I don't want to spend too much time, in the intro, but I'll just say that Enderal the production value is so impressive, fully voiced characters, very fleshed out, as again, complicated storyline, about I would say 50 hours or so of gameplay.
Yeah.
Completely revamped leveling system and character progression system with completely different skill sets from the original Skyrim game. A gorgeous original soundtrack, I think composed mostly by Marvin Kopp.
That's right.
And I've been doing my homework. I did my homework.
I can see.
And it's just, think if BioWare and Bethesda Games came together and created a fantasy baby. This is how I would describe Enderal. And the best part is, it's 100% free, ladies and gentlemen. You can get it for free on Steam right now. All you need, of course, is the base Skyrim game in order to play it, because it's not. I shouldn't call it a mod. Calling it a mod is completely a huge understatement. But like I said, it plays on top of Skyrim, and again, it is completely separate, a completely separate story, completely separate universe. Has no connection to the actual Skyrim story or game, other than it happens to be using the same engine. So, is that about sums it up for you, Nicolas?
I think so, yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
that was a pretty good summary.
Awesome. So, I just wanted to give everybody a warning before we move ahead is that we will be hitting spoilers because I do want to get into a pretty deep dive with Nicholas on a lot of the major story elements and story beats in the game. So if you haven't played Enderal yet, or you're sensitive to spoilers, like I highly recommend you play the game first and experience it yourself. And we'll still be here talking about the game. So yeah, hopefully I can send that out there. Have been fair warned. So Nicholas, before we like dive into the game itself, I just kind of want to get to know you a little bit more as a person because based on your website, you have a really interesting and rich background. Like you grew up in Munich, in a farmhouse. You mentioned that you had a
Mm,
bit of a turbulent childhood, and
yeah,
you lived in 5 different countries, and now you just told me you're about to move again to another country.
that's right.
So, so can you just tell me about where did this passion for storytelling and writing come from? Like, how did that come to be? Like, as you were growing up?
Well, I think I've been writing ever since I can remember. It sounds very cheesy, but back at that farmhouse I mentioned in my author bio, we had this old school. I don't even know the English word, like the typing machines. The typewriter, I think.
Typewriters, yeah.
That's right. Yeah, and I've just always been writing stories. Um, I don't really know why. I think a big part of it is that I'm a very empathetic person. I've always been that, and just writing, like putting myself into other headspaces. It sounds very cheesy, but it's something I've been doing ever since I was a child. And I also always wrote very, I think, weird stories for a kid.
Okay.
Like my first story, which I wrote when I was 10, was, and I'm not making this up, but that was about like a guy, like, oh, it was a fantasy story, but it was like about an older man, like a land, I guess, a kind of lord who had this small island, and he was so depressed at how unjust the people were and how there was so much crime that he kind of struck a bargain with um, like a demonic entity that kind of asked like a small tribute in return for godlike powers. And
Hmm.
that's how he wanted to create like a better world. But the sacrifices got bigger and bigger until at the end he sacrificed his family. That was me at age 10.
At age 10, wow.
No,
Did
it's very,
did do you pull like a lot of inspiration from books, from movies, from
I do,
TV
yeah, I think,
shows?
yes,
Or
I think I should mention that some, I mean, I don't know if you watch Family Guy, but there's this
yes.
very short segment on German fairy tales about this guy, a boy who wouldn't stop sucking his thumbs, and then the mother cuts off his thumbs.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's like a lot of German. I think a lot of German fairy tales are very dark and
Yeah.
very profound, I suppose, like Brothers Grimm and all that. And that really influenced me. So I read a lot. Like
Yeah.
I read all the time. Um, so yeah, and I've always had a passion for stories. I don't know. It's always been there.
That's a really good point because I think at least for Western viewers, we're so used to the Disneyfied versions
That's
of these fairy tales that we don't realize that many of the original source material are actually really dark.
it's
Like
very dark.
Peter Pan, for
Very dark.
example.
Yeah,
Yeah, Peter Pan, for example, is a really dark story, and they kind of changed it, I guess, to be a little
yeah,
more palpable for younger
yeah,
kids.
exactly.
So yeah, that's really interesting. And I guess did you ever did you ever write these stories and then present them to like your parents or your family? And if so, like what did they think of the stories that you wrote?
They were actually very proud. Like
Okay.
I had very supportive parents. Like um, my father passed away quite early, but my stepfather was super supportive, and they always kind of fostered that talent. Oh, if we can call it talent, but that passion.
Yeah.
And also, I went to this very alternative primary school where we were like on first name basis with the teachers, and it was very, I don't know, like very human and creative. And so I also, they also encouraged us to do a lot of creative work, and I
That's
I
so
always
good.
did stories. I always wrote stories, and interestingly enough, also my primary school teacher, he was always convinced that I would be a writer. So I guess he was right. So yeah, I've always been writing.
I'm glad to hear that your family was supportive
Oh,
because
they are.
in contrast, so I lived in a very Asian family. And
Mm-hmm.
so growing up as a kid again, this is just part of the Asian culture. You know, when my
Mm-hmm.
parents asked, "What do you want to grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I was like, I like animals, so I kind of want to be a farmer. And it's like, "Oh, what else?" I says, "Well, I like to bake, so maybe I'll be a baker." And so my mom's like, "Well, that's nice, honey. How about a lawyer, or how about a doctor?" Says, "I don't know, maybe, or
Mm.
maybe like a computer engineer." Okay, good. An engineer is good. You can be an engineer. So again, it's just,
Mm.
I just think it's just one of the funny cultural things.
Yeah, that can make, yeah, I agree. And I think that makes a world of difference. Also, self-doubts. Like if you do anything creative, like you're most likely plagued by self-doubts at some point in your
Right.
career. And
Exactly.
I think having a supportive family and friends as well, but especially parents, like that can make the world of difference. Just because, if you're being told that your endeavors aren't useless just because they are creative, then that gives you a lot of strength. And
Sure. Sure. 100%. Uh, what kind of what are some of the personal experiences that you had influenced some of the storylines in Enderal, if at all?
I think I think a fan on Tumblr made this wonderful meme, which basically called Enderal, Daddy Issues, the game,
Yes.
which I thought was hilarious. And I wasn't even aware of this. Like, I know that they're hardly positive father figures in my stories for some reason. So I guess, like, I wasn't aware of it. Um, but I think that, loss plays a huge role in my life, because my father passed away two weeks before I was born, in Africa, actually. Um, and so that it's just something, it's a topic that has resonated with me ever since I can remember. So loss. And another there's something that happened to me during my childhood, which I'm kind of reluctant to talk about, but
Oh, that's
yeah, another example, for example, is this. I think I mentioned this in my bio, is that I had like a dissociative experience, which happened while I was lucid dreaming. So it sounds like something out of a movie, but it actually happened. I was kind of experimenting with lucid dreams, and that was when I was 16, I think, and I got so absorbed in this whole universe. It's so fascinating. And at some point, I unknowingly took a drug that was supposed to enhance my dreams. So, and then I woke up, and the next day I had like this loss of reality. I think that's like the clinical definition, dissociative experience, where I kind of suddenly started doubting reality was real. And it's
mm,
very, like, it was an emotional thing. I knew it wasn't. I mean, obviously I knew
yeah.
reality was real, but I just felt as though, everything is just, if my mind can convince itself that a dream is reality, because as we dream we
Yeah.
believe a dream is reality, why can't it convince itself of the same thing in reality? I'm not sure if that makes sense, but that was like,
You were having an inception moment, basically.
actually, it
Yeah,
was it
it
was
was
exactly
inception.
that,
Yes.
exactly that. And I mean, it was insane, and it was so incisive. And I got over it because I started therapy
Okay.
right away. But it's been a very defining moment of my
Maybe you
life.
should start carrying a totem, like a little top or something, so you can like tell what's
Oh
real or
yeah,
what's not,
yeah, right.
like in the
I
movie.
mean, thankfully, it was just my brain chemistry just
Sure.
messed up because of that drug. But coming back to Enderal, is, or pretty much anything I write, there's a lot of visions and dreams, and that's also, I think that's where that comes from.
It's interesting. Well, it's interesting going back to what you were saying about how it's a game about daddy issues, because I feel like that is the parallel to the what people make fun of Disney for, because Disney, like, the mom is like either dead or absent. It was always the mom's not there. So it's kind of interesting that you were saying, oh well, the dad's kind of absent, or there's some issues,
Yeah.
some daddy issues of some sort.
It's kind of funny because back when that meme, someone showed me that meme on Tumblr, like I was laughing so hard, and then actually I was writing for the DLC Forgotten Stories, and I was writing some, just some flavor dialogue, some companion dialogue with, I think, Lishari,
Yeah.
the character, and I just looked. I looked at my text, and she was just telling the player about how her father never approved of her, and I was laughing so hard, and then I changed it to mother. So yeah, that's something. I mean, it's funny, but that's something
Yeah.
I really appreciate about writing. It's another reason, I guess, why I love this. I mean, it's not a job for me. It's a big word, but I feel like it's my calling. And one
Yeah.
of the reasons why one of the things I appreciate about it is it really shows you your own soul. Like it really
Sure.
helps you work through things, and it makes you find out things about yourself you weren't even aware of. Like I wasn't even aware that, obviously the loss of my father still played such a big role in my life. And Enderal actually in some ways made me aware of that.
It's such a beautiful form of expression,
It
because you're
is. Yes.
sharing parts of yourself that the consumer may not necessarily realize
Yeah,
that this is something that you're just sharing to everybody. And of course it's like presented in a way that's entertaining, meant to be for
sure.
entertainment.
Mm,
So I find that like super like fascinating, how
good.
much an author is able to like put forth themselves to create these
Yes.
characters that feel so real, like feel
Mm,
like real life people. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why I love the writing that you did in Enderal, is because the dialogue, and obviously a huge part of that, of course, is the voice actors. Like the voice actors is
oh,
a
yeah.
phenomenal job,
They did.
to bring those characters to life and bring your vision. How much, actually, now that we're on the topic of voice actors, how much involvement did you have in like selecting the voice actors for the game, if at all?
I did actually. I directed the whole voice acting.
Okay, okay,
I did all the outreach, and yeah.
gotcha.
I mean, yeah. We worked for the German localization, or the German version. We worked with a voice acting studio that does a lot of work for big name companies and movies, and they were extremely supportive. They're called 2 Day Productions in Berlin, and they worked with us on the previous game we did, Nerim, and they um, made it possible to get some of the German voice actors are actually quite famous. So we worked with the German voice of Kevin Spacey. It didn't age well, but um, Kristen Stewart, and the only reason we were able to, they agreed to do this is because the studio put us in touch with them. So yeah,
That's incredible.
that's incredible. So
I
many cool people.
I didn't even realize like those people were involved. I know
Yeah.
that there were a few that I certainly recognized just from playing other video games. Like I
Yes. Sure.
immediately recognized, for example, David Fenoy. I
Oh,
think is
he's
how you pronounce his
amazing.
last name.
Yeah,
Yeah, if
that's right.
I'm sure a lot of people are watching know, or at least should know, that David Fenoy is the voice actor for Lee, who was the main
That's
character
right.
in The Walking
Mm,
Dead and Telltale
yeah.
games. And so as soon
Mm,
as I heard him, I was like, "Oh my god, this game is so great! Like, there's so much awesome talent here."
mm,
Um, and all of these people, like I know that Enderal like is free, and you get donations from the community. So
mm.
like, did these voice actors, were they also volunteers? Were they also
They were all
volunteering? Oh
volunteers.
my
Yeah,
gosh, that's
yeah.
incredible!
That's insane. Like we paid,
Wow.
we paid more like a symbolic fee to the studio, just to make up for the time, like just 50 euros an hour, but that's nothing. So all the voice actors
Wow.
yeah, did this pro bono, which is insane. Again, as I said, like
Wow.
I was actually surprised. The development was pretty hard because it was like a volunteer project. You couldn't really rely on people, but the people you could rely on, they were fantastic. And also something I found out is that some of especially the successful voice actors like Lani Minella, who's been in every video game since the 1990s, and Dave Fenoy, they were they were so supportive, even though they didn't need this in their portfolio. So a lot of the young actors, they also you had the idea of using this as like a portfolio piece, which is perfectly
Of
understandable.
course.
But yeah, it was a great experience. Yeah,
Um, I know that you partnered with Johannes Scheer, is
yeah,
I think
that's
I
right.
pronounced. You
Mhm.
partnered with him on the main storyline.
Yeah.
So what parts of the main storyline of Enderal were yours versus Johannes, or was it just completely like what do you call it?
Synergetic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say we worked on it together. Like, so basically the overarching plot when I joined the team back in 2011, um, Johannes had this brilliant plot about the high ones and
Mm.
this whole Jungian, it's all very inspired by Carl Gustav Jung, which is the German pronunciation. And so that was all, that was there in broad strokes. Um, but eventually I took over from there. So it's
Okay.
really hard to draw a line. Like he was definitely, he played a big role in, fleshing out the overarching concepts and all
Sure.
that.
Got it. Got it. Got it. And what were I'm sure that as production continued, that certain story elements might have changed or evolved over time, before between early conception and the final release of the game.
Mhm.
So can if that was the case, like what were some of the story elements in the main plot that changed or evolved, like again from early conception to the
Mm.
final release of the game?
Oh, so much. I mean,
Okay.
pretty much. It's hard to answer that question. Like we had
Okay.
to cut a lot of content, for example,
Yep.
but besides that, I I'm having trouble answering this question because
It's
it's
okay.
so much. It was a very organic process, I would say,
Sure.
as opposed to now. Like I defined my writing method really changed over the years since I've been doing this professionally. But
Sure.
Enderal was very organic. Like I had this rough concept, and we just basically wrote quest by quest, which is also why the beginning, structurally speaking, is a bit weak or slow. It's because we're just writing that quest and the next one, and I had a rough idea of where I was going with the story, but yeah, we didn't have like a solid plot line from the start. Just like ideas and directions,
Yeah.
and of course, like the big twist at the end, that was always there.
That was always there. Okay, and that pretty
Yeah,
much remained.
of course, yeah.
Gotcha. You mentioned that there were some parts of the story that you just weren't able to add because of time constraints or because of resource
Sadly.
constraints. Are
Mm.
you able to share some of those things that just never made it into the game that you would have wanted to have added to the game?
Sure. I mean, we did add some of those in the Forgotten Stories DLC. For
Okay, okay,
example, the original Ship Without the Relata quest line, which
okay.
is now one of the most loved quest lines in the game. The Golden Sickle, which is like this story about the two rivaling merchant guilds. But stuff that really didn't make it into the game was, for example, we had a fourth Black Stone quest, which involved uh, Talgard, which is the German pronunciation, this contaminated area with a green fog. So that had a backstory, and it was actually one of my favorite quest lines, but sadly didn't
Okay.
make it into the final game. And then there was also an additional. There were a lot more side quests, and there was also an additional guild quest line about Starlings, Starling technology, and Starling archaeologists, and all that.
Yeah.
Which would have taken place in Duneville, like the desert area, the powder desert. So
Yeah.
yeah, there was that. I mean, there was so much content that I wanted to be in there, like interactions between Jespar and Kalia, more companions. But I mean, it was just too much.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think while I was playing the Let's Play, I thought it would have been really nice if there was more
Mm.
interaction between Kali and Jespar.
They were even
Um,
recorded, like we recorded some of those, but we just didn't have the
oh,
time. Yeah,
oh man.
I know.
Um, And was that also part of the resources? Because I also noticed that
Mm,
whenever you went on these missions, it was always you
mm,
and Jespar or you and
mm,
Kalia. It was never like the three of you together. Was that
mm.
just like a resource limitation or time limitation?
Uh, well, no, the idea was to have certain missions with with exclusively just Bar Kalia, but there were like I had some ideas and drafts for missions with the two of them for sure. But yeah, there was a time limitation. You know, the thing is just like the game was we wanted the game to be released. The original release day was
Mm.
2013, so
Hmm.
you can do the math. Like it took us
Sure.
3 more years to polish the whole thing, and the last final 2 years were just pure bug fixing. So
Yeah.
and we were pretty burned out at that point as well
Got
because it
it.
was so much work. I think I spent personally I spent 30,000 hours on the game, and yeah.
um, even now that the game and its, I guess, expansion, DLC, whatever you want to call it, has been released, is there anything about any of the existing stories, even if it's like a side quest,
Mm-hmm.
that you would have changed? Like thinking back on it, like maybe if I went back on it, maybe I could have changed this plot element
Yes,
instead.
sure, for sure. I would have
What's a big one?
the
Or
beginning. The
the
beginning
beginning
was
you would have
so
changed?
slow. I mean,
Okay.
not the prologue, like the dream, the nightmare
The
sequence.
prologue was great.
Yeah,
Like that
thank you.
set the stage.
Yeah, I was
Yes.
very happy. And I believe it actually made some players, power through the slow first act because they knew that what they were in for. But and the beginning was just very slow, and the way I
Yeah.
delivered, you know, the way I handled exposition, through like these super long dialogues. Um, I would that would be very different. If I were to write it all over again, I would have found a different solution for that.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm not very happy with the first act.
Well, even if you weren't very happy with the first act, I will say
Mhm,
100% the prologue did a fantastic job, like drawing you in, setting the tone for the rest of the
mhm,
game, because this arguably is grittier and darker than the
mhm.
original Skyrim game
Oh
was.
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So I I remember when I was let's playing that I made several comments like this game is serious. Like this is not pulling any punches. Like just the
Yeah.
imagery of what's
Mm,
happening in the farmhouse with like
mm.
the meat sacks and stuff. I'm like, what am I signing up for?
Yeah.
So bravo for like
Thank you.
kind of right up front being able to really draw the person in and setting themselves up for what are they expecting, a
Mm,
taste of what they're expecting from the experience.
thank you.
One thing I wanted to ask, so because this story is darker and grittier than the Skyrim original game, um, and I there's a lot of so many of these quests throughout this game can be a bit of a downer if I was being honest. Like they're very tragic. There
Mm,
aren't very many happy endings. I'm not even talking about the ending of the game. We'll talk more about the ending. But
mhm,
very few quests have a like satisfyingly happy like
mm,
ending. They
mhm,
always have either are gray or just downright tragic. Um, and so I was actually surprised by how much I still ended up enjoying and loving the game because me
mhm,
as a consumer, I tend to shy away from things that are overly tragic and overly dark.
mhm,
And
mhm,
yet I love like The Walking Dead, for example. Like The Walking Dead is
mhm,
is a very depressing and tragic game, but
mhm,
somehow you were able to make it like still engaging and palpable and give the consumer a reason or a motivation to keep going. So
mhm,
that's a long way of me setting up this question.
mhm,
How do you craft, because you seem to be very strong with tragic stories like that or dark stories like
mhm,
that, how do you craft those themes or those elements in such a way that mitigates what I'm calling downer fatigue, like downer
yeah,
fatigue? Or is
it's a good
that not
question.
necessarily a conscious part of your process?
Mm. I mean, I would always say like my writing process is very, some people say there's like gardeners and architects, the
Yes.
spontaneous, intuitive, and the the methodical types, and I'm a very different. I feel like my method is very different, so it's like 50-50 always. But that's a good question. I think the key to making a story, to avoiding like downer fatigue, is to always add beauty to your story. And like,
yes.
so for example, I think one of the reasons the endings were so powerful for some people was that, you know, the characters were like this beacon of light. Like you had these characters you really grew to love, and, you know, Jespar's and Kalia's storylines, for example, they did have like a positive ending. You know, Kalia overcoming her, you know, coming to terms with her affliction, and Jespar kind of realizing, learning to take responsibility. So what I'm saying is that I think you always need beauty to write tragedy, and I think that's something that personally bothers me about some writers of the grimdark genre. Is like they don't see this, and it's also a very naive view of the world, in my opinion. I don't want to sound too judgmental, but you know, if you have these settings which are all super depressing, it doesn't feel real, because, you know, there are certainly some parts of the world which are very grim. But I lived in Latin America for a while, for example, and like a common in Guatemala, and a common prejudice by at least Europeans is that, you know, people out there are always dejected and poor and all that. But like, that's not the case. Like if you go to a place where there's a lot of poverty, you will see that people always kind of create their little islands of, you know, levity, and they still dance and laugh and all that. I hope that doesn't sound weird. Like, I have a hard time phrasing this in English. But long story short, I'm just saying that I think it all comes down to striking a balance. Even
Yes.
like you can write a tragic ending if the build up isn't all dark, because then people will get tired, and it will also kind of feel unrealistic, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, people just aren't like that. So I think that would be my answer to that question.
Thank you for that, because I remember I was contemplating about the ending, because again, major spoilers to everybody, but you've been warned ahead of time. The ending, there's pretty much the bad choice and the worst choice. So
Yeah.
it's like you can either sacrifice just Enderal and all of the living things in Enderal, the continent, or you can sacrifice the entire world of Vin. So, and you could also die as well, and your companion could also die, or you can bring one of the companions with you, but not both. That's the other thing that was so heart wrenching. Like, I wasn't able to bring both Kalia and Jespar. I had to pick one, if at all.
Yeah.
So so I was trying to like contemplate on the ending, and some people might criticize and say, well, like, does it really matter, because all of these people that you were helping along the way ends up dying anyway. And I like that you mentioned the whole beauty part, because I'm like, just because they eventually die, because everybody dies at some
That's
point,
right.
like, just because everybody dies at the end, it does not devalue like the
That's right.
moments of beauty that they did
Exactly.
have. You
Yep.
know, like, I could get hit by a truck tomorrow. It
That's
doesn't
right.
mean that all of the
Your life was pointless.
exactly, it doesn't mean my life
Yeah.
was pointless.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, you know, me trying to help Rheneas, for example, yes, it didn't work out the way I wanted it, but I was able to give, dear Lord, I was able to give that child some semblance of happiness, even if it was for like a few minutes. I was able to
Yeah.
give the kids something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I love that perspective a lot. So
I'm happy to hear that. There's also, by the way, I think you might not even know this, but are you aware of like the DLC, the Forgotten Stories DLC?
I am. I haven't. I unfortunately haven't a chance to play it myself,
Okay.
because my other. But I definitely feel really motivated now that I am
There's a
not
third
only talking.
ending.
I'm sorry.
There's a
Oh,
third a
okay,
hidden ending. I'm not going to
okay,
spoil it for you, but
okay,
there's a secret ending.
okay. I'll try to go for that third ending, because I definitely am motivated to return back, especially after talking with you and then reading after reading your book, which we will get to in a moment. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that sounds cool. I'm excited to hear about a third ending.
Mm-hmm.
Am I allowed to, maybe you can't answer this. If you can't answer this, like, am I allowed to say, is it any better than the other two, or do you just want to keep it a secret?
I would say it depends on your interpretation.
Okay. Okay.
It's ambivalent. Like everything I write is usually ambivalent and ambiguous. So
Okay. I'll take that as a fair teaser.
okay.
Um, which of the side storylines, getting away from the main quest line,
Hmm.
which of the side storylines are you personally most proud of?
Oh well, for the Rolata for sure. Unfortunately, like you haven't played it because I haven't
Okay.
played Forgotten
Okay.
Stories yet.
Okay.
But in the main game, it's hard to say. I mean, the companion quest lines, I guess. I mean, I know they're not
Nice.
proper like they're not quests, but
Yeah.
the companions are they're just so dear to me.
Yeah.
Jespar and Kalia's storyline, and so yeah.
Yeah. 100%. I will be touching on Kalia and Jaspar in a
Mm.
moment as well. So,
Hmm.
but other than that, the one that certainly resonated with me, and I know
Hmm.
that you have mentioned this before in other interviews, is the Silver Glen quest, uh,
Mm.
or is it with Rheneas? I think that's the
Silver Grove, I think
Silver
Silver
Grove.
Grove.
Sorry, Silver
Ah,
Grove.
mm,
I
mm,
misspoke. The Silver Grove quest
mm,
with Rheneas, and
hmm.
that was that hit me like a ton of bricks. And I know that many people did the same thing. I kept like saving and reloading. Okay, maybe I picked the wrong thing. Like saving and reloading,
Mm,
trying to get the
mm,
best ending, and I just couldn't get the best ending out of this. I
mm,
mean,
mm.
there was either the bad ending or the worst ending for Aeneas, and I was like, all right, I guess I'll set it for the bad ending. Uh, I have to ask, where did that story come from? Because it's so I did not. I had to step away from the game in a good way. I
Mm,
had to step away from the game for a
mm.
couple days and like get myself together after playing that story.
Oh, I honestly, it's again like that was one of those ideas that just came naturally, and I think one of the reasons it was powerful is just because it kind of mirrors a major theme, another major theme of Enderal, which is basically, most of my writing is like just the arbitrariness of life and injustice of life. And I think that's why it was so tragic for many people, including myself. Like I also cried while I wrote this, for what it's worth.
Sure.
So and it's just like the tragedy of this boy who never did anything wrong, but who was just
Right.
born with the wrong face, and then was
Yeah.
um, demonized by these villagers, superstitious villagers, and then created this fantasy world. I think that's just something inherently tragic. It's just none of this was basically his fault, and he was just trying to
Yeah.
be happy. And yeah,
Yeah.
it strikes home uh, for many people because
Yeah.
it's in a way it's quite realistic to how outsiders are treated in society sometimes. And
Yeah.
it's always kept, it was actually, I'm not sure if I would say it was inspired by a friend of mine who's disabled, and who's been telling me a lot about how people just unconsciously uh, treat him, even if they don't mean
Right.
any ill. That's just that
Unconscious bias.
unconscious bias. Yeah, there's a lot of unconscious bias, and it's just something that really resonated with me, and I think that kind of inspired me to write this story. Yeah.
I want to tell you, Nicholas, like the reason why his story I think resonated with me personally and hit at a
Mm,
very personal level. And that's why I love this because
mm,
as you said, it can apply to so many
mm,
people
mm,
is I identify as a homosexual gay man. And
mm,
so I definitely know what it's like to be born with
mm,
the wrong sexuality
mm,
and being demonized for something that I wasn't my fault. Like I had nothing to
yeah,
do with it.
yeah.
But I'm treated in a certain way and I'm looked at in a certain way. Even today,
Mm,
like and in my
mm,
adulthood, I'm still fortunately I think like it in general I feel like I was very lucky in terms of how little injustice I've experienced in my life compared to some others, but I still see it like to this
Mm-hmm.
day.
Mm-hmm.
I can go on and on about some of the
Mm-hmm.
issues I ran into just having my son in
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
process, but I'm not going to get into that because that's like a whole nother conversation
Mm-hmm.
altogether.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, I was legit crying during my Let's Play because I know what that's like. Like this is a fantasy story, but it's so real and it just
Mm-hmm.
captures the like just the raw essence of like how, like you said, people who are ostracized, no matter how big or small, that's just a universal thing. And I love that. I think it's just a beautiful, beautiful tragedy. It's a
Thank
beautiful, there's
you.
beauty in the
Thank you.
tragedy.
Yeah. I have to admit, like I watched again, like I think I watched that was one of the bits of your Let's
Yeah.
Play, which I watched. And I was very moved by your reaction. Like it's
Oh,
just,
thank you.
yeah, no, that's the reason I do this is just to
Yeah.
see my stories connect with people. And I'm also, of course, I also, I'm a big story fan. I read a lot, I
Sure.
play a lot. And I think that's a very beautiful and enriching feeling to just connect with the story in
Yeah.
such a way. So I was very humbled, actually.
I hope that, well, I'm glad. I hope that that was very validating for you as a writer because
Sure.
obviously, getting money from this is great through
Mm,
like your book and stuff, but I feel
mm,
like hopefully reactions like my reactions, like the fans of the reactions, just showing how
yeah,
much this affects them, appreciate it. I hope that that's also like probably even more valuable than money itself.
that's the reason I'm doing this for sure. It's honestly, it's so humbling. And I'm gonna, because you also shared a personal note. I think I actually had this one mail. Like I'm still getting a lot of emails from readers and from players who tell me these things, and it's not only validating. It's just it it, it it's very spiritually fulfilling. I
Sure.
mean, it's a big word. I know. In the end, I'm just
Yes.
writing stories, but I
Yeah.
think there was one email by a player who had terminal illness, and he didn't go into detail, but he said like
Okay.
he was basically tied to his bed
Yeah.
his whole life, and he was never able to go out and experience a lot of the things that most people experience. And he said that the characters in Enderal felt so real and so authentic that I gave him, or we gave him, the opportunity to experience some things he might have never experienced otherwise. And I just
Right.
cried. I just cried because I
Ah.
was so moved by that. Um,
You gave people like them a voice.
mhm,
You basically gave a platform, even though that wasn't what you might have initially intended, but you pretty much gave them a voice and having us stop and realize. And maybe
mhm,
people who have played this game might think twice
mhm.
the next time they see a disabled person or somebody
That's
who
my
is
hope. Yeah,
terminal
that's my
illness,
hope.
they might think
Yeah.
twice, which I think is again incredibly powerful thing for a piece of fiction to do, you
Thank
know.
you. Thank you.
No, but I again going back to what I was saying with you reaching out to me, I also was so humbled that somebody who created this game that I love took the time and effort to like uh write a comment to me, and I have to tell my viewers this right now. I unfortunately was not notified. YouTube did not notify me that Nicholas wrote anything on my video until a year later.
Mhm.
So as soon as I saw that comment later, I thought, "Oh my gosh, this poor man had to wait a whole year for me to finally respond to him." And so I'm so sorry, Nicholas, that it took me that long to respond
No
to you.
worries. No
But
worries.
then it gets worse, ladies and gentlemen. It gets worse. So then Nicholas, the whole reason why we're talking right now is because Nicholas actually reached out to me a few months ago, Christmas Eve actually. You messaged me on Christmas Eve and said, "Hey, if you remember me, like I commented you on your video. I just want to let you know I'm coming out with this new novel." Um, and of course, like Facebook doesn't notify me, and I don't get back to him until almost 2 months later. So I did it to him again. So I'm so
No, but I
sorry.
no, but I knew I was aware that you just weren't notified. Like because the same thing happens to me all the time. Facebook and especially Instagram. If once you have a couple of message
Yeah,
requests piling up on Instagram,
it
you
gets
just
lost. Yeah.
yeah, it just gets lost, and so I don't mind. Like I was aware that you probably just didn't
Yeah.
see it. So
Well, I still want to apologize, and
No
I'm still
problem.
very embarrassed. But thank you so much for taking the time for
You're
doing
welcome.
this,
Thanks for having me.
of course. But I do want to start moving on
Sure.
towards the book. But I think a good setup for the book is I want to start talking about the companion characters, in particular Jespar.
Mhm.
Um, so in the game, where did Dal'Varek is how you pronounce his last name, right?
That's right.
I love his
Dal'Varek,
last
yeah.
name. His whole name is just really cool. Where did Jespar Dal'Varek's concept come from? Is his personality based on people that you know in real life?
It's funny you'd say that because actually had a discussion with a couple of readers and players who I would now consider like friends of mine, and
Okay.
I think there are a lot of parallels between Jespar and me.
Oh, really?
I
Okay.
mean, he's not a self-insert. He's not like I don't tend, I'm not leaning towards repression as much as he does. He just represses his problems, um, and just pretends they're not there. I'm not like that, but I've more in common with him than I would like to believe sometimes. Um, but generally speaking, I think it's hard to say. I think that the he evolved from a character that a very, very different character, which
Yeah.
Johannes originally um, concepted. And there was like this old philosopher who the player meets like at a stream and just stacking up stones, like just creating like
Okay.
this. I don't even know what the word for it is. But and then for some reason, I just took that character, and at some point the star came out. I don't know. Like
Okay.
again, quite often, like these days, I plot as much as I can just because it just saves me a lot of work. But for me, it's unavoidable. As I write the story, things change, and characters change as well, and they evolve. And for Jespar, it was just this. He started out as this very, cynical, roguish, charming, sellsword kind of guy, and eventually, as I wrote him, I just discovered the whole, his whole the suffering beneath this surface, and that just kind of grew organically, I think. And
Yeah.
actually, I wasn't expecting him to be that popular because him being a romance option, and how in the end, like he doesn't like he wants like it's kind of not necessarily open relationship. He doesn't
Yeah.
want to give it a name, and
That
I thought that, yeah, I thought people would hate that.
that I don't know if you saw my let's play when I was talking about that, but I spent a good 30 minutes, like I was pausing in between his dialogue, like
Mhm.
just analyzing, like breaking
Mhm.
apart and analyzing everything that he said, because I will preface this, take this as a compliment. This might be a little bit awkward since you mentioned parts of Jespar from you, but take this as a compliment. Jespar is one of my biggest video game crushes in the history of video games. So take that as a compliment,
Thank
Nicholas.
you. I do.
And I think because he is so complex, as you
Mhm.
know, and I think what is really ironic about that is, as you said, his philosophy on relationship is as I think very non-traditional.
Yes.
And
Mm.
I mentioned this in my uh, in my let's play, is that it really challenges what a lot of other people might feel about
Mm.
like committed being in a committed relationship, and
Mm.
what does it mean to be in love with someone? Is that really your own true love, one true love, and all that good
Mm.
stuff? And it's really made me question some things, and obviously, like you said, it could be very controversial.
Mm.
um and even though, like, at the end of the day, I feel like that philosophy doesn't fit me personally,
Mhm.
I was still able to like understand where he was coming from, and
Mhm.
I think that just made me love him even more. Was that he was so honest and so
Mhm.
open
Mhm.
about these concepts, knowing that he
Mhm.
might be rejected for them, but
Mhm.
he doesn't
Yeah.
care. He
Yeah.
doesn't care, which I
Mm.
think makes it even sexier. and, um, but like, I don't know, like that entire conversation was probably one of the most realist conversations about relationships, because so many other games have done
Mm.
romances, like obviously BioWare, for example, have done
Mm.
romances, and they never get into that deep in talking about what does a relationship actually mean for this character.
Yeah.
So, like, that wasn't really a question, but I was just like applauding you for
Hmm.
that because that
Hmm.
was probably one
Thank
of
you.
the most unique experiences I played in any game is just having that discussion with him.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Actually, a lot of people reached out to me afterwards. Also, like, yeah, also a woman I'm now friends with, um, who, or she lives polyamorously.
mhm.
And while I wouldn't, classify Jespar's relationship model as polyamorous per se, it was just very interesting that many people, polyamorous people, reached out to me and said like they were so grateful that his plot character arc wasn't, oh, now I'm finally met my one true love, and now I'm going to commit to them, because that's like the classic, like that's
That's
the
very classic.
traditional model, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's and that I kind of stayed true to his character, and that's actually something I thought about for quite some time. I wasn't sure if this is like I was honestly worried that people would hate him, and I think, yeah, I'm glad you didn't hate him.
I feel like the answer is yes, realistically, but like how much flack did you get about that aspect of his character? Like, did you get any negative feedback about that?
No, honestly, not that much. No, just Bar was very popular. I think I got some
Yeah.
flack for Dreams of the Dying,
Okay.
but I was expecting that. I was so aware that some people wouldn't be able to emphasize with that, but no. I mean, there were some people who were, of course, uh, uh, offended by the LGBT representation.
I'm curious about that.
Yeah.
As being a member of the LGBT, what were their concerns or what was their feedback?
Just some people just they have just an ideology, and I think they just see it as, they just get offended by uh, LGBT people existing, I think. I mean, but on
Oh,
on
I
the other
see.
hand, I also got some flack from people who called me uh, and misogynistic or something like that. It was so bizarre.
I
Yeah,
don't see
yeah.
that. I don't see
No,
that at
me
all.
neither. It was just, I think her criticism was that she voiced the criticism, and that was just so bizarre. Um, she basically said that every woman in this game was raped at some point, and I was like, no, it's
I
just not
don't think
true.
that was
Nobody was.
true.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. And I'm just saying this. That's a very personal topic to me, and I
Yeah.
would never take this topic lightly. I think it's something that's
Sure.
worth exploring in
Yeah.
stories, but it was just so bizarre. So yeah,
I feel like everybody's life sucked in this one. Like everybody suffered something tragic
yes,
and horrible.
yeah.
So I mean, not obviously not lightening that subject at all, but
Mhm.
I personally don't see it. Was some of the LGBT like feedback because they felt that Jespar's uh, ideology with Rome with relationships was like generalizing or misrepresenting the LGBT community? Is that what they were saying? I still can't imagine
No,
what they
no, no.
meant.
That like most of the, again, like I wasn't criticized by LGBTQ members of that community. It was more like some, I guess, particularly. I don't even.
Okay.
I have a hard time wrapping my head around
Sure,
the
sure. That's fine.
American politics. Like you have like this left thing and right, and in Germany, being left means something entirely different. So I got some flack from that, but I didn't get that much criticism. No, I think some remarks here and there, but that's just that always happens because people,
Yeah.
and that's fine. Like people are entitled to their opinions.
Yeah,
You
of
don't like this
course.
game, that's fine. It's just.
Was it your decision or somebody else's decision to have Kalia and Jaspar be bisexual or available to both male or female main characters?
Well, well, I think, I mean, Jespar was. It's hard to say. It was my decision for
It
sure.
was your decision for sure. Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah. It was my decision. I mean, I'm also bisexual, but that wasn't why I did this. Like,
Sure, sure.
I, I as I said, like Jespar isn't like a kind of self-insert, but
Okay.
um, I think the reason why both of them were bisexual is because it kind of fitted their personality. Like, I wouldn't have done it if, for example, had I felt that Jespar was exclusively straight or Kalia exclusively lesbian, that I wouldn't have made them bisexual. I think it's kind of cheap sometimes.
Yeah.
If everybody's, I think it's called player sexual. That's the thing.
Yeah.
It just feels a bit weird to me, but it just felt right for these characters, so that's why I did it.
Well, speaking as a gay person, I obviously very much appreciated the fact that I could romance Kalia or Jespar if I wished.
Yeah.
And one thing I love about Jespar, and the reason why I like him so much, is because he doesn't fit. I feel like in many other games that do allow for gay and or lesbian romances, they always fall in this category that is a little tropey and, in my opinion, a little like stereotyped. And the unfortunate thing is my personal type, when it comes to people that I am attracted to, are normally like this, what ends up being the straight characters. So
Yes.
I'm playing a game right now. I think people might know what I'm talking about, but I'm playing a game right now where that was the case, where there's a straight male and then there's a gay male, and I 100% connected more. It's not even about attraction. It's just like connecting to their
Connection, yeah.
personality and their view in life, and like just
Mm,
how they operate and behave. Like just getting their physicality off the side, like their personality, I felt jived way more and connected way more to me than
mm,
the person who happened to be gay. And that
mm,
actually unfortunately happens more often than I would like in video games. And
mm,
so while I understand people are like, it's not realistic to make everybody bisexual, but I'm like,
true.
well,
Yeah.
it kind of sucks for the people who go into a game, and the romance honestly is one of the biggest reasons why I play certain games. Like the romance, that's one of the things I look
Mm,
forward to the most, even more so than the main storyline.
mm-hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, obviously, as much as I love the main storyline of Enderal, I was way more invested in any of the storyline I had with Jespar,
Mm-hmm.
just because of that connection. So
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to say thank you for that,
You're
because
welcome.
I definitely would have fallen in love with Jespar and would have been so disappointed if I couldn't like romance him as my character, because then I would have felt like this happened again. Like once
Mm.
again, there's this romanceable character, and there's only a male. The male version that I was most interested in is not available to me. So thank you
I
for
agree.
making that.
No, you're welcome. And I think it's a very interesting point. And it's quite often it's also a matter of resources. As I said, I would have loved to have written more companions, but it's not always an option, just budget wise and all that. So I agree that bisexual, having a bisexual character just really solves a lot of these problems. But yeah, but I know, yeah, I agree.
Okay, so now that we've talked about almost an hour about the game itself, about Enderal, I want to actually like move on to the main reason why I wanted to chat with Nicolas is talking about his book, his first like published novel, I think,
Mm-hmm,
officially published novel, called Dreams of the Dying.
mm-hmm.
Obviously, without getting too spoilerly, tell us about what is this book about?
Well, I guess you could call it a prequel. It's a trilogy. It's the first book in a trilogy that explores
Nice,
Jaspar's past as a mercenary.
nice.
And the novel itself is a lot about mental illness, I guess, trauma, repression.
Oh wow,
Very lighthearted, my usual
wow. Okay, yeah.
usual stuff. And it deals with a mission. Jespar winds up in Chile, the archipelago of Chile, which is this tropical, very capitalist island empire. And the Chile is on the brink of civil war. Like there's a lot of injustice, and the country's most powerful magnate has fallen into this inexplicable coma. And through various circumstances, Jespar ends up having to travel into the magnate's nightmares to figure out what happened to him and prevent this catastrophe. And whilst doing that, he gets confronted by his own repressed trauma and demons. That's the
So a
story.
lot, as you said, a lot of light stuff.
Yeah, of
um,
course.
I because I was gonna say, as we said earlier, Enderal's overall overall tones and themes are dark and gritty compared to Skyrim. So I guess we are expecting to see the same amount of dark and grittiness in this story as well. It seems like pretty much.
Yeah, I would say it's not my darkest story. I think
Okay.
actually, I think I haven't. I've written some stuff that's I believe is a lot more polarizing and a lot darker. You know, not
Okay.
dark for the sake of being dark, but Dreams of the Dying, of course. Yeah, I should. I always preface this by saying it's not for everyone. And also, when
Okay.
friends ask about this book, I wouldn't recommend this universally to everyone, just because it deals with certain subjects such as mental illness
Right.
and trauma, and I guess it can be upsetting for some
It,
people.
it, it can be triggering.
Yeah, but I think I
So,
handled this issue sensitively,
okay.
and hopefully I did it justice.
Have you actually had, because I know that people, I mean the book is out now and I know that there have been review
Mm,
copies that have been available.
mm.
Have you already gotten feedback from people that have experienced like trauma and like
Yes, I
and
have. Mm.
what was their feedback in terms of how well you represented it or how sensitive you were on the topic?
Actually, like most of the really like raving reviews were by people who struggled with these
Wow.
things. Yeah.
Wow.
I had some. I recently had someone actually reach out to me, thanking me for the novel, and that person said that he has been struggling with some things in his life
Hmm.
lately, and the book actually encouraged him to finally seek therapy. And again, that's one of these things that just means the
Yeah,
world to me.
of
Um,
course.
I think it's kind of yeah. I think most of the people who have a connection to this topic will appreciate it. I think some people. I'm not saying everybody who doesn't like it, because it's not a perfect book by any means, and it's polarizing, right? But I think people who hate it, or some of the criticisms of some people calling Jespar like an asshole or cruel, that didn't make any sense to me. But I think it's just something. If you've never experienced mental illness
Yeah,
or the places your mind takes you, uh,
sure.
then it can be hard to emphasize empathize
Hmm.
with
Hmm.
Jespar at times. So
Gotcha.
yeah, but I was actually I got some fantastic reviews, and I'm actually super floored, because every
Right.
day like there are new reviews, and some people don't like it, but so far, like, I think the rating is extremely good. It's like 4.68
That's
out of
good.
5. Yeah, with
Yeah, that's
reviews.
great.
So
Well,
we'll see.
I will definitely be reviewing it as well. So,
Happy to hear that.
who knows, like if you're up for it, maybe we can get into another discussion over it once
Sure,
I actually
sure,
read
I'd
the
love
book.
to.
Oh, that'd be amazing. That'd be awesome. And hopefully it won't take me a year. It won't take me a year to get back to you about it.
Well, I have your email
Um,
address now, so that
yeah,
should
you have my
that
email
should
address, so
solve
that
it.
makes it a lot easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Nicholas, I was curious then, because this is touching on Jaspar's like history, like some of his past. How much of Jaspar's history in this book or in this story or this trilogy, how much of it did you already have established during the development of the Enderal
Mhm.
game, and how much did you formulate after Enderal was released?
Yeah. Okay, that's a good question. First of all, so I initially published Dreams of the Dying as a web novel, a web serial,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
one chapter per week, and but the web edition it's very flawed, and I wasn't happy with it, and I wasn't ready to put this out as like my debut, and so I did a lot of rewrites, but eventually I reached a point where I realized that you know I can't tell the story I want to tell if I don't change certain things about the lore and the canon. So
Yeah.
I'm very careful about changing established lore,
Right.
but
Right.
I still, and I actually I address the whole thing in the foreword, so I explain what this means. So I would say that the Jaspar story in the novel is very it, it diverges from his original backstory in some aspects. Like the
Okay.
main the main things about Adila and like his parents, that's still the same, and it's very uh, it's a defining element of his personality, but I expanded his backstory a little, and it's I would like to call it like, you know, you have this whole idea of eventualities and parallel realities in the game law. I would kind of like to call like another eventuality. So it's a prequel, and the events of the trilogy will tie in with the main game.
Got it.
And Jespar's issues will, you know, Jespar's storyline will also be, it will echo a lot of the themes of his Enderal, of his game character arc. But you know, I just realized it's 3 books, and if the character would have to be relatively static, if that makes sense, because, you know, he's still at the start of his character arc when the game starts. So basically he would have been, you know, he would be going in circles, and he couldn't go anywhere. And I think that would have just been, it wasn't very satisfying artistically, but it was also quite boring and unsatisfying for the readers, because he just didn't make any character development. So I revised, like I reimagined some aspects of his past, but it's still, you know, of course, like the key events, they are still the same, but I expanded his whole mercenary background. And you will see, I'm actually quite curious to hear your opinion, because the book Jespar, the Jespar in book 1 is very different from the Jespar in the game, but that's also because it's 8 years, and he will go through a lot of character growth over the course of the 3 novels. So.
Wow. I'm so excited. I'm super pumped for this book. I'm waiting with bated breath. And it's perfect because my son is about to, obviously with my 8-month-old son, it's my free time is a little bit limited, but the grandparents are going to have him in New York City next week. So that might be time for me to sneak in and start speed reading through your book. And what also might help, I only just realized this a few days ago. And I just screamed out loud when I discovered this. But apparently, I'm sure you know this, obviously, the audiobook version is narrated and read by Ben Britton himself, who is the voice actor, the English voice actor, I guess, of Jespar. I was fangasming so much. I was like, oh gosh, I might honestly just like read the book while I'm listening to the audio version, just because I love. Again, as I said, superb job on voice acting this character.
Oh, he's fantastic. Ben is such a great guy. But just before you, the audiobook, the revised edition, like the novel, the physical book, it's very different from the web novel. So the audiobook isn't out yet. Like the stuff that's on YouTube, it's obsolete, like it's deprecated. So we are actually in the process of recording the book right now. And I have so much respect for Ben. Sorry?
Ben is still doing it?
Of course.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay.
There are actually 2 protagonists. Like there's a secret protagonist as well. He's narrated by another character, by another voice actor. But actually, it's just a side note. You know, I'm a bit of a world building nerd. So this novel is set like in this Polynesian inspired archipelago. So and they're like the natives, like the indigenous people of the archipelago, called the Makehu. And I actually worked with a linguist to create their own language, because I just didn't want to make a fantasy word. So there's actually, Makehu is a language you can speak. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I have so much respect for Ben, because he has to manage all these accents and another language that doesn't exist in the real world. Yeah, I mean, Licia has a different accent to Jespar. Then you have the Spanish accent of the Chileans.
Oh, I can't wait.
Accent.
I can't. As somebody, so I'm not sure if you play tabletop gaming or DMD or anything like that, but as someone who GMs a lot with tabletop gaming, like accents are hard.
Oh yes.
And it's even worse because I publish my campaigns on my YouTube channel, and so cool. when you're publishing them in public, you try really hard not to offend anyone with my terrible accent. So I try to apologize. So more power to Ben for being able to pull that off.
He's so cool.
Zero pressure, Nicolas, but if you and I are able to talk about your book once I've read it and are able to convince Ben to appear, even if it's just for 5 minutes,
sure. Yeah.
I would die. I would seriously die if he joined us. I would just like
Sure. No, I think I'm pretty sure he'd be happy to join. I'll bring it up
Okay.
next time we chat. I will.
Ben, if you're watching, no pressure, but just know that I am a huge fan and I love your work, and even if it's just for 5 minutes, I will be so happy. So
I think he'd
happy.
be he'd be happy to join as well.
Okay. I'm excited for that. Cool, cool. All right. Uh, so, okay, continuing the next question. I guess the obvious. So, the trilogy, like you said, is going to be covering Jespar's backstory, even in the next two books. Um,
Mhm.
I guess the obvious question is what about Kalia? What, is there any thoughts on doing the same thing for Kalia? Or are you not allowed to
Yeah.
say that yet? Or
Oh, I can. Like you're not the first person to ask that. The reason I chose Jespar isn't because I'm more fond of him than I am of Kalia. It's just that Kalia's past is a lot shorter and less, you know, less flexible in terms of locations and
got it,
settings. Like Jespar
got it.
was, he was a traveling mercenary.
Sure.
So every book will be set in a different continent of the, as it's now called, like illumined world. It used to be civilized world, but now it's illumined world. So that's the main reason. I'm not sure yet. I might write more stories in the Enderal universe, but I have so
Okay.
many story ideas, and I'm kind of afraid I'll run out of time.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, maybe one
Okay.
day.
Well, maybe a short story. I don't know. Just a thought. If you ever feel so inspired, because
Yeah,
I do love Kali as well. I know that
yeah.
obviously we're going to be talking about Jespar for
Mm.
today, but I wanted to make sure that Kalia got a little bit more love too.
I'm super
So
curious how you feel about Tharael, who's the protagonist of the Ralata storyline, because I think he's
okay,
almost as popular as Jespar,
interesting,
which really surprised me. There's so much,
interesting.
yeah, especially there's so much, fan fiction, like romantic fan fiction about
Huh.
Tharael, and it really surprised me because
Hmm.
I wrote him to be as unlikable as can be, but people just like that for some reason.
That happens, and I tend to not be one of those people who likes. I always to tell myself I don't really like the bad boy
Mm.
characters as much. Like I love them as characters, but not necessarily romantically. So I'm definitely very. I love the Boy Scouts. So there's a lot of video games where they clearly are. A lot of people criticize are the boring,
Mm.
like the boring uh, romanceable character because they're the most stable. They don't have as much baggage. They are always like good and like goody two shoes. I'm like, but I like that.
I'm the same.
I
I'm the
like
same.
stability. What's wrong with having stability in your life? Like I
Yeah,
understand that
I'm the same.
maybe it's not as drama filled, but I'm like, I play these games to escape from drama.
I
Like
know.
let me have my stable boyfriend, even if it's just in a video game. So let me have that. So
I'm exactly the same. Mm.
I'm happy that you don't think that I'm weird and we actually are in the same wavelength. So thank you,
No,
Nick.
no, we are. We are. I totally, I feel you. Again, like I would, not in a million years would I think about romancing Farrell if he were like a real person. But
Sure.
I mean, I still think he's one of the best characters I've written. Like he's up there with Jespar and Kalia. And I mean,
Okay.
my personal favorite character, from a writing standpoint, is actually TLO. I mean, he's not very likable, but
Right.
it's just like I love his character arc and his
Yeah.
whole narcissistic personality. It was a fun to write. It was a lot of fun to
Yeah.
write.
Well, I'm looking forward to again still getting something new in this world, not
Mm.
just with the book, but with the expansion. So thank
Mhm.
you for dropping in some juicy teasers there. Uh, cool. Is there I guess my last question of Dreams of the Dying is really just do you have anything else that you want to like say about your book, or is there anything that you want to like tell people these are some of the things that I want you to get out of the story, or really anything at this point?
That's a good question. I should probably have some answer. I should have prepared some answer to
No, it's okay.
that. But no, I just think that I'm very happy with the novel, and I'm my own biggest critic, so that says something. I'm happy with this. It's not perfect. But yeah,
Okay.
hopefully some people out there, some people following your channel will like it as well
Yeah,
and maybe connect with it
I hope
on a
so.
deeper level.
Well, for those of you watching, like everything that you need to know about how to get yourself a copy of this book, I will be posting on the YouTube channel again. Please, please, please support Nicolas. He's a lovely person and so
Thank you.
gifted and talented. I'm not just saying that because he's right here and I have a huge crush on his character. I'm not just saying that, but yeah, if you want to know more, I'll make sure that I put all of the information. And as a special bonus, I'm doing a giveaway. So for those of you who are interested in getting your own copy of the book, just just throw down on the comments below. Just let me know that you would like to be added to the drawing, and I will draw a lucky name and prize you guys with your own copy of this book. So hopefully, that'll be a really awesome opportunity to spread the story love. So
Appreciate that. Actually,
yeah,
that when you mentioned giveaway, actually, I just remembered something I would like to add. Hold on,
sure.
just give me 1 second.
Okay.
I'll just get something from the shelf
Okay. Okay.
because I completely forgot to mention this.
No problem.
There are three editions. Like there's the ebook, there's the paperback, but there's also like the hardback, which is a bit on the pricier side of things, mostly because it's just so expensive to print. But
Yeah.
as an extra, the hardback. Okay, I need to enable my camera to see what I'm showing.
Sure.
So the hardback comes with this. Okay, this is what the book looks like, by the way.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Like, yeah, it's by
I love that.
yeah, the cover is by a super talented artist called Dominic Dero. He's amazing, and
Beautiful.
because I just love his artwork so much, and because apparently I have too much money to spend.
Okay.
Sadly, I do not, but I actually commissioned an illustrated appendix full of world building, and so that's only in the hardback, which is what you're getting.
Oh.
So what that comes with is, I'll just show you
Beautiful.
some drawings. It's a 100-page appendix, and you get like these drawings, for example.
Wow.
These are like the Mackay people I talked about. This is like a scene from the
Yeah.
colonization, but
Oh my gosh. Wow.
there's also a bestiary. There's a pretty picture of, for example, this is one of the creatures here.
Oh,
It's very adorable.
it's like, what is that creature called? I can't
It's
tell.
called Alapu, and it's basically visually it's a mixture of panda, bear, a piglet, and a raccoon.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Oh.
I also cooperated with a zoologist to kind of create like realistic bestiary entries. So it's all very solid. Like it's not just me babbling and writing stuff.
Sure.
It doesn't make any sense. And here, because I know some of you, here's, for example, one of my favorite illustrations of a myrid.
Oh wow. So all of these creatures you came up with yourself.
I
All
came
of
up
these
with them, and I
creatures.
worked with a zoologist to make sure they're like realistic. You
Oh
know,
my
their breeding
gosh.
habits, everything.
Oh, I
And
love it.
there's also a bit about Chilean fashion, but there's also, I think you might like this.
I love the depth of this. I love
Yeah,
how deep you get into the world building. Sorry, my son just came in, so
that's fine.
go ahead.
And there's also pencil drawings, sketches of the characters. For example, this is the Jespar
Oh,
from back then.
I am still in love. I am still in love with that.
Happy
That's
to hear that.
beautiful.
Yeah, that's
Thank
the
you.
illustrated edition.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'm not going to show all of it because it's too
Okay.
much, but it's 100 pages, and there's
Okay.
lots of stuff. There's also a guide to the language, the Mackay language, written by a professional linguist. They're like
Wow.
phonetic system and grammar and everything.
Okay. Well, hopefully that shows everybody who's watching just how, like, again, just how committed you are to this world. And
I'm very committed.
I'm just very no. I am super impressed by how much we are able to explore in this one book, and it's only one of three, and that's the best part. So
Thank you.
I'm super pumped. Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, thanks so much for telling us about this book. And again, if you guys have a chance to pick it up yourself and read it, please spread the word and share your thoughts to your friends, and hopefully you'll be able to send a little bit more love to Nicholas, since this is something that as he said, this is his passion, this is his calling, and I personally feel like you've more than shown that that's the case. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm humbled.
Okay, so the last thing I wanted to say before I ask just random questions at the end that I wanted to save for in case we had time is I'll let you just announce it or talk about it. Nicolas, is a new edition of Enderal. Could you tell us a little bit about what that is? I know that you don't really have any involvement directly with it, but if you want to like plug it, that'd be
Yeah.
great.
So there's some people might not know this, but Enderal is now available on Steam. Like you can install it really quickly. And you don't need to overwrite your Skyrim edition any longer. That was actually something Bethesda made possible, Bethesda and Steam. They were really cool about this. But we weren't going to do a port to Skyrim Special Edition, which looks a lot prettier and is a lot more stable. And so some fans actually took it upon themselves and created a functioning Skyrim Special Edition port for Enderal. So there's a new edition of Enderal coming to Steam called Enderal Special Edition. Who would have guessed? And this is coming out on, so far, their anticipated release date is March 18. And you will also be able to install it via Steam. So as long as you own Skyrim Special Edition, you can just install it with one click. And yeah, I'm very excited about that because I might actually be replaying the game because we just didn't have the time to do the port. So the fans were super helpful in that regard.
Yes, thank you for announcing that. And I think probably as of this recording, it might already be out, maybe because it's March. You say it, like you said, so it might already be out by the time. Anyway, I'll make sure that whenever it's released, I'll make sure to include that in the links below as well, including just the general Steam page too. So anything and everything Enderal are right at your fingertips in this one place. Awesome. Cool. So I guess now I have a bunch of extra questions that I'm just going to fire at you until you have to leave, basically.
Okay,
so
cool.
This is one question I want to make sure I add is actually a question from one of my viewers. This is from Monochrome. And Monochrome asks, are there any funny meme Easter eggs that you guys put in the Enderal video game? And if so, what were some of your favorite Easter eggs?
Oh, I know there was several Easter eggs. The level designers put a lot of them in there. Besides that, see, the problem is it's been so long since I last worked on Enderal, so I actually have to.
Yeah. Well, the ones I remember, to help you out, the ones I remember, I think there was a character named Luke Starwalker.
Right, that was but that's not even the best Easter egg. There was some even funnier ones, but I can't really recall. Oh yeah, oh that's not really okay. That's actually a bit mean, but it's not really an Easter egg. But I had a lot of fun with this poet. If you remember the guy in Ark who's reciting his poems, for example. That was actually in response to a conversation I had with a very, in my opinion, uptight literature professor who went on about everything that's popular is bad and all that. So there's that. Besides, I added a lot of, I had a lot of lighthearted quests and which are more, which don't take themselves as seriously, which you might enjoy in Forgotten Stories. But besides that, I can't actually think of any more Easter eggs right now.
I know that one of the biggest memes in the original Skyrim game was I took an arrow to the knee.
Right.
And I
think
there
was that.
There was that, and I think there was a mention of the arrow to the knee in Enderal as well. And I don't know if that came from you or somebody else suggested
No, that was me. That was me. For sure.
I love that. That is
there was
so clever.
More, yeah.
And then, well, there was a Easter egg of a minstrel character named Nicolas the Archaic One. Which I think is supposed to be a reference to you.
That's a reference to me. Yeah, that's because I have this. I follow this diet, which some people call archaic
Archaic. Oh,
diet. Yeah,
okay.
it's not paleo, but it's actually microbiotic diet, and
Interesting.
so they came up with that word.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. That's neat. So there are a few. There are a few.
Yeah, there are a few, but I wish I could remember all of them. There are some funnier ones, but I can't remember them right now.
Okay. I think, well, I think you just mentioned it, and I remember in a previous interview you also mentioned your professor, and how you tried to give your professor your story about the Silver Grove, I think,
Yes.
or what was the Silver Grove, and your professor sent it back to you and basically said they thought it was rubbish. In their opinion, it was rubbish. So I was just curious, did they give you any specific like reasons why they felt it was rubbish, or they did without any explanation beyond that?
Um, I mean, actually, we got a lot of pushback from my uni. Like, I developed Enderal while I was in uni, and a lot of this was part of my like um, a lot of the assignments. I brought some of the elements of Enderal, like some parts, in as like a uni assignments, and we actually got a lot of pushback all the time because they wanted us to do like mobile games instead. Which doesn't make any sense to me. But
Interesting.
actually, that thing, that event you're referring to was, we wrote this Silver Grove quest as, like an assignment month at uni, and it was supposed to be like a vertical slice. So it's like when you take, maybe you know what it is, but it's basically when you take like a small part of the game and you polish it to like
Yep.
release to gold
Yes.
standard. And
Yes.
so we presented that quest in front of the rest of the class, and actually they all laughed at us, which was kind of
Oh,
insulting. Yeah, I wasn't
they
too bothered about
they
it, but
laughed at
yeah,
Renee's story?
they laughed at Renee's story. But I do think that I don't think that's because they all like hated it. It was more like I think it's a story more for, it's not very flashy, it's more for like an intimate setting, and there's a lot of dialogue, and there's a lot of, first of all, they're like children, which is a hit or miss for many people. And yeah, so I think that's why
Okay.
it wasn't that well received. But I mean, I guess we got our payback. So
I guess.
I wasn't really bothered about it. It was just
Yeah.
silly.
As you said, everybody's entitled to their opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I have this history as
so
well of, I don't want to digress too much, but I have this history of, for some reason, my writing doesn't seem to be very critic or award friendly. Like, it's interesting, but I haven't won like a single award for my writing ever since I've written many games, and players love them, like universally.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
and also my novel, I think it's just, I don't know what it is. I think it's just something about the way I write and my approach to realism, and also how I kind of like to explore very uncomfortable themes. And for some reason, that doesn't sit well with critics. But maybe
Yeah, I
that
can see that.
change. I don't really care. So,
Well, like, whatever you're doing is still working for the people who are reading them. So
and that's what matters. Yeah,
it works for us. So I'm happy to hear that. Another question I had about the game: are we ever going to learn anything more about the Veiled Woman? Because I feel like she never really gets explained, and I don't know if that was on purpose. That you really don't, you never really know exactly much about her. Like,
well, actually, there's a side quest that explores the Veiled Woman in Forgotten Stories. But it's not like it won't answer all your questions.
Okay.
She's going to be a very ambiguous character right until the end.
Okay. That's good to know. All right. Okay, so the next question I have is talking about the ending again of Enderal. So pretty much everyone dies, as I said, at the end of the main quest, and like I said, you can optionally have your main character and a companion survive with you, and it's one of those tragedies where no matter what you do, the cleansing, it happens anyway. And to add insult to injury, you pretty much, it's actually your fault that the cleansing happens. No matter how hard you try, it seems like, the story is saying, or at least the character is realizing, that your fate is your fate and it's pretty much sealed. Like, that's a pretty bold uh that's a pretty bold storyline to pass on to people. Is like, nothing that you do will change anything, and you are your own fault of whatever bad thing is happening. So um so yeah, I guess my I was curious about like what made you decide to have that bold of a message, I guess, in this story.
Very interesting that you interpret it this way, because actually it's more about so for example, like Enderal is, it's an exploration, like the one of the major themes. It's how we are like our own worst enemy, and how we have to kind of constantly confront and deal with our demons to grow as human beings, but also as a society. And so creating a happy ending would have kind of rendered that whole message and that whole theme pointless. So
that's a good point.
Yeah. So the way, like what I see, the way I because a lot of people, you're not the first one who was a bit depressed by that, or who took it as that kind of everything is pointless message. But for me, it's more like I would like to believe that it ends on a hopeful note. maybe that's just a German definition of hope. It's very different. I'm not sure, but for me, Enderal, like the final decision is more about, do you trust mankind or humankind to overcome their demons or their ego and save themselves, which is like the catharsis ending, where you give humanity a second chance at the expense of your own life. Whereas the Brave New World ending is more about like, it's a more cynical conclusion, where you kind of believe, okay, humanity is too broken to fix itself. We have to start from scratch. And that's basically just a philosophical question. Like that's how I see it. And the second, like A Day in Spring, I'm not going to spoil it for you. That's like a completely different, a third answer to this philosophical conundrum.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's interesting. I didn't mean to imply that I personally saw that was the main message going on. I just know that other players had that in their head, and so I just wanted to like
they do. I can see that. I can totally see that. And again, you won't believe it or not, but I'm actually a sucker for happy endings. So whenever, I love to watch depressing movies and I love to see everybody go through hell, but at the end I always want there to be hope and like a positive upbeat ending. And but I do like to believe that there's an element of hope to either ending, or let's say all three endings.
I think, well, one thing that I always kind of joked about, since you're talking about hope and like, even though there's can be tragedy in it, is I found so many parallels to the Mass Effect storyline in this game. And and I don't know if it was just coincidence, because to be fair, it's coincidence. But to be fair, like, I don't think I didn't believe that you were necessarily like copying off of Mass Effect, but I think like that whole idea of there being some sort of apocalyptic thing that you're trying to stop, and then you need to create this whatever thing to stop it from happening, and how that there's like a cycle. Like, I know that is, you can see like elements of that kind of storyline through history.
That's right. Yeah. First of all, that's something that comes up a lot, and my answer to that is usually, first of all, we wrote the story back when Mass Effect 3 wasn't even out yet. Like,
wasn't even out yet.
It wasn't even out yet. And secondly, I do agree that there, as you said, like this is like an archetypal story, first of all. And actually there's this, I forgot what it's called, but there's like this movie or book from the 90s or something that actually Mass Effect took great inspiration from. So it's not like it's, as you said, it's a very classic story. And to me, the reason why, even knowing all that, the reason why I don't quite understand the Mass Effect comparisons sometimes is because the focus, like the themes, for me, what makes the story is a theme. You can have the exact same plot, but the themes can be so different. And the theme of Mass Effect is basically kind of intergalactic cooperation, like survival through cooperation. I guess, overcoming our differences.
That's true.
That's how I see it. And whereas Enderal isn't about that at all. Like Enderal is all about how our minds, our own demons, our own enemies. And that's you can every single storyline, even the side quests in Enderal, reflect that theme. So that's why it kind of surprised me. But yeah.
I appreciate you explaining that to me because again, when I was making those references, it was more as a joke.
No,
more as a joke, because even me as a dungeon master, like I borrow and steal from other stories all the time. Like that's just something that like I totally get. But and not saying that that's what you did here, obviously. But I love how you explained that sure, the main skeleton architecture might be there, but might be similar, but the themes are very different, and I 100% agree with you. And now that you pointed that out, like, yeah, you're like, absolutely, like I get that, and hopefully that'll help clarify other people who might have seen that as well.
And I say that as someone who greatly enjoyed Mass Effect. I even liked the third part. I don't know why everybody hates it. Oh no, I mean I do understand. Yeah, I do I do understand why it wasn't what people wanted, but for me it was, again, like they had a philosophical decision at the end, but that doesn't. Some people just, I guess, didn't like that, which is fine. I mean, it's subjective.
Yeah. Another really unique thing about this storyline is that in traditional stories, you have something called a big bad. But in this storyline, you kind of have a big good. You have a big good that ends up kind of sends things tumbling down. Besides the PC character, Taylor, I think it's Taylor is how you pronounce his name. Tealor, sorry. Tealor Aramthiel. Like he's kind of the big good in this because he tries to stop the cleansing, but ends up being the cause of it to begin with. And ultimately, like, it was him that determined the fate of mankind. And unfortunately, he's a flawed character, and that was the whole point. And like you said, a lot of how things were going to play out was really on him. And there's only so much that your character could do to influence that. And so I don't know, again, if that was intentional, that you were coming up with a big good.
Oh, absolutely.
Awesome. I love that.
That was like a very conscious decision. Like, actually, I also experimented with, like, Tealor is supposed to come up as this almost tropey archetypal leadership, wise leader. Like, not necessarily wise, but like, he's a leader. I think the Jungian archetype would be the king, I think. So it's like everything about him was very consciously, purposefully crafted. And also his rhetoric, for example, something I did with Tealor to make him stand out more was that he never uses like the, what's the English term for it? Like the would, like I think it's called conjunctive, I think, the grammatical term for it. Like we could do that, we should. He never says this. He always says like, we will do this. And it's actually, to me, it was eye-opening just how much we actually believe people who just act as though they know it all, and they just act like they are, they portray confidence, and they don't like, they're very resolute, I think is the word I'm looking for, and people automatically follow those kinds of people. That's why it's very easy to manipulate people this way. And so Tealor does that on purpose. Like that's he always tells people what they really feel, for example. And that was like that's also why he's one of my favorite characters. Like he actually just, he does want to stop the cleansing, but the main reason he does want to do that is because he wants to be remembered as a hero. Like he has this martyr syndrome, I think is what it's called. Like he wants to die a hero because all throughout his life he failed. Like he failed as a father, he failed as a commander, and that's his big shot at redemption. That's how I wrote him. And it
goes back to the ego and like, what are you willing to sacrifice?
A narcissist. he's a narcissist to the bone. And also I have to really applaud, sadly, Andreas Wilde, the voice actor, he passed away.
Oh, okay.
But he was a genius in my opinion. Like he voiced the character in English and German both.
Okay.
And he was just like, he just nailed that voice, like this
Yeah.
conviction and this. I mean, if we had, okay, what I'm kind of trying to say is, if we had someone like, for example, I don't want to, I don't know that much about American politics, but for example, I think one of the biggest issues of Trump would have been a lot more dangerous had he been more charismatic. Like, he was charismatic in his own way. You can't deny that. But imagine someone like with the intelligence and the rhetoric of Thiel or Ramthiel with a very, very sinister agenda.
Right, I
like
can see
people
that.
would just follow him like sheep.
I can see that.
And that's I think.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the. I kind of tried to write a character who would be very dangerous in real life because he's so charismatic and yeah.
Right. Oh, I love it. I love the complexity of these characters. I know we're nearing the end of time, so I'm going to give one last question. And this actually is a follow-up to a video that you posted a few months ago on, because you mentioned this actually earlier in our interview about gardening versus architecture, like being an architect versus being a gardener in your writing. And I know that you were sort of asking your viewers, what they thought you should be doing for your next big project. Should you take it from a gardening perspective, an architecture's perspective, or a hybrid of both? I was just curious, like, what did you finally decide, or what did you finally land on, and what led you to going that route?
Okay, that's a good question. I think I decided to. I would, at some point, I would like to write like a pure gardening story, but I eventually realized that I should stick. So when I wrote that was when I had just finished the web edition and I wasn't happy with it, and I was kind of reflecting on my methods and my craft, and so I was kind of I was doubting like my craftsmanship, but what I ended up doing was just really sitting down and analyzing the way I write and the way my mind works. And now I came up like with a completely different method of my own, which is what I always compare it to like a mosaic. But that's I think that would be I could talk about this for hours. So I kind of ended up, to answer your question, I ended up just sticking to my guns and just really trying to build my own method, I guess, my own storytelling method.
Which I think what you're saying is more of a hybrid of the two, or
it's a hybrid, but it's also it's very different. Like I can just
a different profession. A different profession outside of gardening and architecturing, then.
Yeah, I see it as like someone who builds like a mosaic. So for example, I need this intuitive and spontaneous element. Like, I'm not somebody who can just plot a story and then just write it from beginning to end. And at the same time, I realized that the gardening thing is just nonsense because I just waste so much time. And that's what happened with Dreams of the Dying. I was just kind of playing it by ear, and I was just writing this and writing that. And at the end, there were so many flaws and structural flaws, which would have taken so much time to redo, that I just kind of ended up stuck with like a half-baked solution. And so what I'm kind of doing now is I start with this very intricate story skeleton, which is very three-dimensional, and that's why I kind of refer to it as like a mosaic. It's not like beginning to end. It's more like, let me try to explain it this way. Okay, you have this character, Jespar, or you have a character and he goes from point A to point B and he does something.
Right.
But at the end, at point B, you discover that something happened in his past, which makes you see an earlier event in a different light. Okay, and that changes your perception of the story, and that's why it's kind of branching. It's like a mosaic. It doesn't just go one direction. It just kind of fills in as you experience the story.
Sure.
And in the end, especially now that you've played Enderal, you will see it in a different light. Like, you will see the events, like, for example, all the foreshadowing that was there, that you were dead, and all that. That's why I kind of like to refer to it as a mosaic. And it's so I'm kind of building my mosaic, and to stick with the metaphor, like sometimes I just find out that a piece doesn't fit, or that it would look prettier or would look more impressive another way, and then I just rearrange it. So I have this hybrid method. But
that's interesting. I think that actually is a really good analogy, because when you were talking about gardening versus architecturing, I can kind of see that as a GM when I'm doing tabletop writing as a GM. I kind of do both because I love twists. I love twists in stories, and nothing is more satisfying to me than to read a piece of story and you get to the twist and you're like, this author like planned this out and helped set this up from like the very beginning. And I love, that's why I personally really love the Harry Potter books. I know that there's a lot of things going on with J.K. Rowling, but ignoring the author right now, talking about the art and not the artist. Like you could tell that she had a plan and she set things up so well, and so I love that. And so when I love adding that to my campaign as well. But the beauty of tabletop gaming is it is very collaborative and very organic, because the players are also telling the story too, and they also have minds of their own, and their characters have minds of their own, and as a GM I can't control that. Like it kind of has to grow. So I set up, just like you said, I sort of set up a skeleton and say these are the different beats. Like these are different beats that I want to hit in the story without railroading the story. Just saying we need to hit this and we need to hit this, and this is how I kind of see the ending. But even at the ending I see like different ways it could work, or depending on the choices that the characters make. And so that setup is the architectural part, and then the organic gardening part is when I'm actually at the table playing and just reacting. We're all reacting to each other, growing this story. So that was one of the reasons why I thought that gardening versus architecture kind of spoke to me.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. Like you can't be too rigid. Like you have to set up plots in order for them twists in order for them to land, but at the same time, especially in tabletop RPGs, you just have
you need flexibility.
You need to be flexible. So I've never played, I have played it once, but I was just, I think, I was playing with some guy who was like very technical, and he just spent every round discussing numbers and like skill sets and builds with the GM, and I was just so bored. I was like, I want to get on with the story.
You need a story. You need a story GM. Like you need a very big story GM. Well, again, no pressure, but if you ever wanted to try it as a guest on one of our campaigns, I think you would probably come up with a really cool concept, because my tabletop games are crazy story driven. Like sessions will go on and we won't be in a simple combat because there's so many deep things happening between the characters.
I prefer that. Combat is like nice, but I'm a story person.
I know you're not I know your time is limited, but I'll send you like links to some of my like proud tabletop moments, and you can decide for yourself like how much you want to watch if you're interested in
I'd love to take a look at it
someday. That's great. Cool. Okay, Nicolas, so I think I'm about to get my son and be on baby duty. But so I think I would have to wrap things up and let you go. But again, thank you so much. Like this has been a dream come true for me to actually sit down with somebody working on something that has been such a wonderful experience for me as it is for others. So on behalf of not only myself but everybody else who adores this project, thank you for bringing this to fruition. And I know you spent so many hours, thousands of hours, and like thousands of letters, thousands of words, like 5,000 or something ridiculous, like 50,000 words putting this together. We appreciate it. I'm so happy to hear that your book is coming out, and I wish you good luck and many success.
Thank you.
And thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So again, guys, thank you so much for watching. I'll have links to Nicolas's website and all the things that you need to help support him in future projects in the description below. And who knows, we might see him here again in the future. So thanks, guys, so much. And until next time, love yourselves and love each other. Bye-bye.
Bye.